don't believe I have either.
I've seen some tornado damage and stuff. No,
Never seen anything quite this
but you next to him.
quite this bad.
Well, you got to speak that way if I do that.
I'm not. You need to make sure you come through, Master. I know you will. Thank y'all for being here. Thank y'all.
Everybody ready? Thank you all for coming out. As you can see, there's a lot of folks that have come out today because we have an unprecedented situation in our state, frankly, in all throughout the Southeast. But right here in Tennessee, right here in this spot, it's evident that something historically horrific has happened here. And I'm joined by leaders from, obviously, our U.S. senators, our House Representative, Lieutenant Governor, leaders from the House and Senate, local leaders, local business leaders, all come together, in part to show this community that that there are a lot of eyes on this community, and it stretches across multiple counties in Tennessee. And let me just say, I've spent the day out there with folks. It's heartbreaking. It is horrific. It is, at the same time, it is hopeful as I see this community come together. So I've talked to folks that have lost everything in tears, devastated. One resident said, you know, I'm too old to start over. And it's heartbreaking to see. And it's obviously, as you look around, it's obvious that many have lost everything. But we also saw churches and nonprofits and neighbors stepping in and helping their neighbors clean up. And you see this rush of local officials, TEMA, FEMA, from the federal to the state to the local emergency management agencies, local county mayors with tears in their eyes out there serving their people. There is a great deal of hope when you see what is behind the effort, the coordinated effort in this community to begin to rebuild. At the same time, we're in the middle of an unfolding circumstance. There are people missing. There's a lot unknown. There are a lot without water. There are a lot without power. But there are a lot of folks that are working to do something about that. We have 400 TDOT workers in the region. We're at the site of a bridge that has failed. We are already in the process of engaging contractors to fix that bridge. But we have 400 workers. We've surveyed 300 bridges. There are 5 that are completely gone, and 27, I believe, 14 that are compromised. 27 roadways have been impassable at this point. Started with about 50, but about 25 have been opened. There is a lot of work being done, and there is a lot of work yet to do. But I've been very encouraged and impressed by the level of coordination that's occurring across the state, and by what are very hopeful, signs going forward. So there are a lot of folks here that we're going to open it up to questions. I'll take the questions, but if there's a particular person you'd like to ask a question of, the Department of Transportation Commissioner Ely is here. He has spent his day separated from us looking at bridges and highways and assets in the state as it relates to transportation. So Commissioner Ely is here as well. Colonel Perry from the Highway Patrol is here, as is Commissioner Long. Obviously, we have Highway Patrol engaged all across the region, both from a security standpoint, but also from a search and rescue, and from working with the TBI to make sure that missing persons are located and reunified with their families. So we have folks from all departments of state here and from all branches of government. So again, horrific heartbreaking, and yet hopeful at the same time. And that can happen, and it is happening out there in a state that is filled with remarkable people, and this community is the brightest example of that. So happy to take your questions.
Two things I'll put in, and that'll be all for me. But one is we had seen last night that FEMA is allowing folks in North Carolina to apply for aid from the federal government, but not here in Tennessee. Why is that, and is there anything we can do about that? And then secondly, what kind of resources, monetarily or support-wise, is the state committee to?
So we have requested of FEMA or from the federal government on the day after the flood, we requested an initial emergency declaration, which we received. That opened up a level of funding and a level of response. We now have made requests for a disaster declaration, which we expect to be approved shortly, which once again opens up the ability for additional funding for applications from FEMA. So this is all a process, but we have worked really rapidly to make those applications. Both senators and the congressman here work together to support our effort with FEMA and with federal government, and that turnaround is rapid. And that's the reason that we're going to be able to have folks make application.
And then what resources is the state committee to
Well, there, depending on how the federal dollars flow, we generally have a 25% match. At the time it becomes a federal disaster, then there's 100% federal money flowing in. The state obviously has resources as well, as evidenced by TEMA. We will be, and evidenced by Department of Safety, we will be utilizing the funds of the state to impact this region in multiple different ways.
Governor Lee, you said this was an unprecedented event, historic. Did the state do enough to prepare the residents for a catastrophe like this?
I think it's hard to imagine preparation for something that's never happened, and certainly this has never happened here. What I'm most impressed by is the way this community has responded. Yeah, that's all I'd have to say. Yeah, go ahead.
Governor. This is an event that is described in terms of odds. Sometimes they say it's a 1 in 100 year event, a 1 in 200 year event. We've even heard of 1 in 500 year events. This is an event beyond any of that, greater than a 1,000-year event. It's never been recorded. But the thing we have to be prepared for now, and this is what I've been so impressed by what TVA is doing, what our first responders are doing, is we're trying to move this water out as quickly as we can, because there's another storm brewing in the Atlantic. If it takes the wrong turn and comes up here again, our ground's saturated, our water levels are high. We've got to be prepared to deal with that, and we are doing everything we can to be prepared for what may come next.
Let me add one thing too. As I watch Blackhawks flying in the distance, I didn't mention the National Guard, but obviously our National Guard has played a significant role both in search and rescue through the initial flooding period, and now in the continuation of support work to drop water into communities that are cut off from other communities. So I want to make sure that there are in excess of 200 soldiers in the region. I believe we have 9 helicopters deployed in this area, so there's a significant push from the National Guard as well.
And
Yes.
law enforcement
Why did
Yeah, that's good.
helicopters respond to Unicoi County Hospital before Tennessee?
Oh, because the governor and I were communicating actually that afternoon, and we had deployed our helicopters from their locations where they were stationed. It was going to be about an hour and a half, 2 hours before they could get to the site. Virginia knew that, and as you know, Ballard, the system, is both in Virginia and Tennessee, so there's a mutual understanding about the importance of getting this done. We were very grateful, and I communicated with Governor Youngkin. We were very grateful that their helicopter got there some 15 minutes before ours did, and then we had National Guard helicopters, Tennessee Highway Patrol, and Virginia State Police. And it is a remarkable thing, the effort that it took to evacuate all of those people without loss of life. We're really fortunate for that. Yes.
A lot of folks are questioning about the time the state of emergency was called. A lot of states around us called it on a Thursday, and we called it that Friday. Is there any clarification about why you waited and
Yeah, so I think, as you know, the hurricane first went into Florida and then went into Georgia and then went into North Carolina and then came to Tennessee. So there are obviously hours. You don't call for an emergency until you know there is one there. So the timing of that occurred with the timing of the emergency itself. And let me add too, as I talk about responses and initial responses before the emergencies were declared. My first call about what was happening at the hospital came from a local sheriff and reached out to me, which we began the process of helicopters. In fact, they had already begun because the hospital itself, because Ballard had started the wheels moving on getting helicopters there. But local law enforcement, I can't thank them enough for their immediate response across all of the 5, 6, 7 affected counties. Our local EMAs and local law enforcement, including firefighting departments, have been incredibly well coordinated.
Multiple people on Friday went to work at Impact Plastics, and they never made it home. The floodwaters came, and it was too late for them. Is that acceptable? And what responsibilities do employers have to their workers during times like this?
Yeah, I think it's tragic. What's happened is absolutely tragic, and there are still missing persons. I don't know about from any particular business, but from all up and down this river. There's a lot unknown about what unfolded on that day, and I suppose we'll learn what has unfolded in the future. And I can't speak to particulars about a certain building, but it's tragic, and we will know more as the days unfold.
I recently spoke to a family member of one of these members who was working at the factory, and they expressed the frustration of being, it's day 5 and they don't know where, what has happened with their family member, and they're questioning authorities. What is your reaction to this?
It's absolutely heartbreaking to think that there is someone here in our community who's still looking for their loved one. It's also
Day 5 and they don't know anything.
it's a reality that when a tragedy of this magnitude occurs, finding missing persons is an incredibly difficult job. I can say nothing but positive things about the hundreds of men and women who are out there, even now, trying to find those who are missing and determine if, in fact, they've lost their lives or if they're just unable to be reached. The effort has been Herculean, and I have nothing but support for those officials who are out there right at this moment, looking for those who may have been lost.
Governor Lee, from a local standpoint, there are a lot of conflicting numbers that are going around. TEMA will give us a number, and then a local sheriff will give us a number. Why is that, and are you satisfied with that type of response when there are so many people still missing and we just don't have those answers to give to these families?
I think that's a really good point you make, and one of the challenges is that when there are a lot of numbers out there, then there's a lot of misinformation. It's why you see that TEMA does not publish numbers of casualties until they are absolutely confirmed and appropriately confirmed. So we will only issue numbers from the state when there has been a true confirmation of that casualty. A lot of other people will report something that they might find or they might hear about or they believe to be true. We think it's important, in order to dispel misinformation, that we take the time it takes to confirm casualties before we report them.
We have time for 2 more questions. We'll take 2 more.
More of an
Is there anyone who hasn't asked a question that would like to? Yes.
Speaking of going off of some miscommunications, a lot of the people here, especially who are closely impacted by impact plastics, are members of Spanish-speaking communities, and they've had a hard time reaching TEMA officials, and TEMA officials have had a hard time communicating with them. So can you talk about any efforts? One of the spokespeople said that he didn't know that there was a Hispanic community here.
Yeah, so one of the real values of coming out here is finding out what the problems are. That's exactly the reason we come. We can hear information, and there's tremendous coordination. But when I walk through a neighborhood and I ask someone who's standing there by their home, what has worked and what hasn't worked for you? And we get information that is helpful for us to go back here, 3, 4, 5 days later, while we're still in the midst of this process, and say, guys, we can do this better. That kind of information, for example, how it is that we can make information from TEMA more accessible to those who have English as a second language. It's valuable feedback. And Patrick is here, and Patrick Sheehan, the director for TEMA, and I'm sure he's
right here, sir.
heard that question. And you may want to.
We have translation services going now, so we did not know the size of the Spanish-speaking population here when this event started, but we are aware now. We're contracting for translation services for both ways, for us to communicate with them and for them to communicate with us should they call in.
Can you talk through that effort of establishing that knowledge about them? I know they sort of did a lot of advocacy.
Yeah, so we have the incident management team that we deployed here to Unicoi County, and that's who you spoke with right here, talking to the public information officer. So as we're working with Jimmy and the community here, we discover these problems, and as soon as we see that, okay, we need to get translators, we're having problems communicating, we started, I think a day and a half ago, working on getting translation services up and running.
We'll
So
take one
One
more.
we
more
are on the
question
ground.
from somebody who hadn't had one. Anybody?
Governor,
Last word.
any update as to when you think they're going to get some work done on the interstate and maybe get traffic flowing out here again?
Commissioner, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you. Let me just say, I'm going to give you what we've done in 100 hours. We're now about 100 hours into this. And just to set a little bit of gauge on the amount of water the force of the water that came through here, you have to recognize that we had 1.2 million gallons a second coming through this very place we're standing. That, as comparison, going over Niagara Falls is about 700,000 gallons per second. So that gives you a little bit of a contrast or perspective on exactly what happened here. So since then, we had 47 sections of roadway that were closed down. We've now opened 25 of those. Now we've got 25 reopened already in that amount of time. As the governor said, we've had 300 bridges that have been inspected, and that's to get these things back open. Obviously, this is going to require a rebuild, and 5 of those were totally wiped away. So those have already gone. We've got 4 already gone to contract. 4 other debris contracts that have been done now. So we've done a tremendous amount of work in the last 100 hours. We'll do twice as much in the next 100 hours, and we're going to get this done. Thank you.
Say your name, sir, please, one more time.
Butch Ely, E-L-E-Y.
He's the Commissioner of Department of Transportation. I'll take one more.
Kathy?
I was going to ask about impact facilities, but I think there was a lot of, there's a spotlight on this community, on that facility in particular, and a lot of family members were out here. They're grieving. You see the despair in their face
Yeah.
because they don't have answers. And the biggest question is just the communication, the language
Yeah.
there, because there was clearly a disconnect. And
Yeah.
what struck me was when I heard the TEMA officials saying, we apologize, and this was a failure on our part.
Mm-hmm.
That was tough to hear. How does that sit with you?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, again, we're seeing tragedy here, and we've seen it unfold. You are right. The faces of these families, the tears in their faces, it's hard for any of us to see. The lack of communication and the ability for us to communicate with populations in the aftermath complicates all of that. It doesn't change the initial circumstances or outcomes, but we want to respond to people in a way that they know that we care, they know that we are here for them, they know that their circumstance matters to us, from the governor's office to the local EMA. Whenever there's an inability or a disconnect, like a language barrier that has not been anticipated from TEMA in this county, which we are not, we're not on the ground in this county until we have a tragedy, but whenever there's a disconnect like that, we want to address it immediately. It's tragic what's happened here, and it's tragic what's happened to those families. And to the degree that we can provide aid for them, timely, in a quick response, in a way that makes them know that we actually do see them and are very concerned in their well-being, that's our goal from this day forward. And when we miss something, we'll correct it, and we'll make up for it.
Something about communication.
Please, sure.
One thing we've noticed, I'm Diana Harshberger, the representative for the 1st District U.S. Congress. HARSHBARGER. What I wanted to let you know, there's no substitute for boots on the ground. When you go to Mountain City, you go to Johnson County, you go to Rome Mountain, you hear what these people really need, and communication is what I heard. Every county I've been in, I was in Cott County till 9 o'clock last night. And I want you to know what we've done as just a regional effort. We had 10 different Starlink systems given to us by a donor, and it was Robbie Starbuck who sent them up from Nashville, and he brought a crew to put them in. Last night we implemented 3 or 4 in Newport and Cott County. Today we went to Mountain City and we went to Roan Mountain, and we put those Starlink systems in, and we have one here for Irwin. That's the number one thing that I heard from people on the ground. They said, we have to drive to Johnson City from Rome Mountain just to get communication. So this is why we're called the volunteer state. People step up, and I've gotten calls from all over the country. We have tractor and trailer loads. Johnson County said we need water. Newport has no water. Greene County has no water. These people are stepping up. And now I heard from Patrick, the TEMA director, that they're going to have a staging facility at Bristol Motor Speedway, and we'll make sure that is out to the public, that they know what's happening, and then they'll ally from that. But it's the kindness of people who hear about our plight here in East Tennessee, and we were just happy to be a part of that, to set these stations up to where they could get out and emergency communication.
Lawmakers here. Do you guys? I know that you left for a recess, but do you consider that there is a need to go back to Congress to do legislation to get more appropriation for this emergency?
There is a letter that Senator Haggerty and Senator Tillis, Senator Budd over in North Carolina that we have sent to Senate leadership, encouraging us to reassemble and to address this. I think until people actually physically see what is here. And of course, Saturday, the governor and Commissioner Ely, Director Sheehan, Congresswoman Harshbarger, and I had the opportunity to go through and survey everything, and then today to be on the ground. Addressing that is so important. On the issue of where to find information, on our Senate website, we have a web page, and people can go to blackburn.senate.gov/Helene. And on that page, we have put all the links, the phone numbers for county mayors. This way, for people that are needing help or people that want to come in and help, have the proper contact, where to send donations or where to engage in order to help Upper East Tennessee.
I'll close with comments about that. To add to that, there has been a great outpouring. We were at the local Baptist church here that has set up a food bank, and we have officially delivered about 50,000 cases of water, but there's water, there's diapers, there's food, there are shelters set up, hot meals being delivered in every one of these affected counties, and most of them are being implemented, and that's being facilitated by nonprofits, anywhere from, national nonprofits like Red Cross all the way down to the local church. TN.gov/TEMA has also information besides the Senate webpage about where individuals can go to either volunteer or to know how best to volunteer, whether it's to send financial resources, where to send them, when people want to help, and there are lots of people that want to help, and we are so very grateful for that. There are ways to do that, and you can look at those websites and go to those links that allow you to be a part of the volunteer state as we serve the people in our community. Thank you all very much for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Governor? Run hard. I want you to stop the heels. Good to see you, Senator.
Can I get you in a minute? Yeah. For an interview? I've got to grab the senators first, and then I'll kind of get you in just a second. Thank you, Mary. It's hot. It got really hot.
Oh, I know.